Well, hey everybody, it's your friend David, and I am your host here in the growth space. And I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with me. We've had some really amazing guests over the past several episodes, and I've had some great feedback from you, the listeners, who have shared with me just about some of the podcast guests. Kim DeYoung is one of them. Regina Bryan, and then today's guest, Ken Schmidt, is going to be another one, I'm sure. And I'll tell you more about Ken in just a moment. But if you would do me a quick favor, before we get into this episode, would you just hit a 5-star review or a 5-star rating and give us a little bit of a review? Maybe there's something that one of those episodes with either David Miller or Kim DeYoung or one of the previous guests, maybe something that they said, maybe that there was something that impacted you in some way. Leave that as a review. Just, share one thing that impacted you and really maybe why you listen. I would love to hear that. So if you would do that right now, that would really be amazing, and I would really appreciate that. So go out, rate and review the podcast wherever you listen, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's any other podcast app. We'd really, really appreciate it. Now, getting into today's guest, Ken Schmidt is my guest today. And I wanted to have Ken on, and we had such a great conversation on many different levels. There's many different levels of growth that we talked about. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have Ken on is because he is one of the business world's most demanded executive advisors and speakers. And that's really driven by his acclaim that he earned leading the Harley-Davidson motor company's against all odds turnaround in the 1990s. Maybe some of you don't even know that Harley-Davidson really was ready to go bankrupt. And he was part of the executive leadership team that helped bring it back and actually brought it back from the brink of financial ruin to what really now is a global brand and global dominance. And so that is why I wanted to have him on, because he has such a great perspective on what it means to have a brand and how to tap into human psychology to create that loyalty that, of course, if you're a Harley-Davidson rider, you have this affinity and this connection to the brand. And so he is also the author of Make Some Noise, The Unconventional Road to Dominance. He's the host of a podcast called Tailgating with Geniuses podcast. He's the co-founder of Torque Sessions Leadership Training. And Ken's success is unconventional. His business approach is a playful and outspoken. And that's really led him to a lot of consulting assignments with household name brands that are brands that you would know if we share them here. And that's transformed him into a highly requested speaker with more than 1,200 keynotes that he's presented globally as of this recording. And so I'm really grateful to Ken, and he's a Penn State alum and grew up in State College, so we have a brief conversation about that and what took him from the middle of Pennsylvania to Harley-Davidson, and it's a really great conversation. So I know that you'll enjoy it. And so let's go ahead and get into that conversation right now. Well, hey, Ken, welcome to In the Growth Space. Man, I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you ever since we kind of did our pre-call and got to know each other a little bit.
Great to get to do this and have some fun. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so let's start with, first of all, you're a Penn State grad or alum. You grew up in State College, right?
Yep.
How about that?
I grew up in a factory town, and the factory was a university, which is a strange way of looking at it, but that is the town. The town of State College is basically Penn State, so everything funnels up and draws energy from or feeds into the university. So it gets ingrained into your blood from From
Right.
the time you're on a bottle and in diapers, you're already thinking Penn State
You're
football.
thinking Penn State. Yes, exactly. Well, I'm curious. How did you get from State College to working with Harley Davidson? I mean, that's clear across the country. I'm sure there's a lot of steps in there, but I'd love to hear that
There is,
story.
that was not a direct jump. I was working in Chicago actually. I worked at two different marketing agencies there,
Okay.
advertising and PR. First, back when the big agencies used to do combine all that stuff under one roof. I don't think anybody does that anymore. But I was uh, one of those right place at the right time. I was at an industry function talking with somebody at an agency across the street and doing what marketing people do. Who are you working with and what accounts are you on and what's that like? Car companies and soda companies. And the guy said, yeah, but we also have like one account that nobody wants to work on. I said, oh, what's that? He goes, Harley Davidson. I said, oh my God. A major motorcycle guy said, I would sacrifice a limb to work with those guys. He said, yeah, but they're going out of business and the market, they're just in terrible shape. I don't care. I'm gonna. We need to talk. So I was over there
Let's
2 days
talk.
later,
Yeah.
and 2 weeks later, I was on the payroll. So I said, this is
Oh
great.
my gosh, that's
Uh,
amazing.
Started going up to Milwaukee, hanging out with Harley. Said, this is it for me. This is kid in a candy store, uh, drunk in a brewery time. It doesn't get any better than this. It's wow. I have to work here, and I did, and it just again the timing was perfect. They were in really bad shape,
Mm,
uh, and I got to be part of making them or helping them to return to not only fighting shape but the dominant fighting
dominant.
shape. So it
Yeah.
was a great time in my life for sure.
Uh, I love that. I'd love to just kind of dive into that for a second.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the things that you learned there at Harley Davidson? Because, I mean, obviously, that was a company at that time that was not doing well, and they turned the corner. And I always like to kind of understand what were some of the things that the company did, the leaders were thinking about, and really, how that transition happened.
Well, there's nothing like being broke
True.
in your eighth decade of business to get people focused on, okay, what we're doing clearly isn't working. The
Working,
whole
yeah.
world knows we're filing for bankruptcy, and this really famous company is in great danger. And if I had to uh, condense a lot of the lessons learned in, first of all, why the business was failing and why it took off, I would say it in this sentence: what Harley Davidson was known for what it did,
Mm,
and what it did was make stuff, you
yeah.
know, motorcycles,
Hmm.
and sold motorcycles and motorcycle related stuff. And the lesson is that if all you're known for is what you do, you are at a very distinct competitive disadvantage,
Mm,
uh, because, and I don't care what business you're in now, especially, is uh, there's nothing you can do that other people aren't also doing equally well, if
right.
not better.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, selling what they do for less money.
Mm,
So what I mean is all we were known for is building motorcycles. And a lot of negative stuff too. People didn't like us for, public image wasn't that great at that time. But just purely from a go-to-market standpoint, Harley made the same mistake that most of the businesses I work with today are making: is we need to show the world what we do and how good we are at what we do.
mm,
And I said, that's awesome. You've officially rendered yourself a commodity,
right.
because you
Right.
can't, you just can't over the long term always promote and glorify what you do. I mean, unless you've got a cure for, you know, cancer or infectious
Yeah.
diseases that absolutely nobody else has, someone else
Right.
is doing what you do. So the
Yeah.
the real key to being a dominant competitor and being greatly differentiated in your market space is being known for who you are, because that
Mm,
makes an enormous difference in how people view your business.
mm. Yeah. And so I guess how did you switch that? How did you change, how the company was being portrayed in the marketplace from, who they or what they did to who they are? I'm
What
kind
what
of curious of that. about
Yeah,
that.
what was interesting is at that time, if you went back to the mid 80s, which doesn't seem
Yeah.
that long ago, but when you say it that way, it's like, damn,
Right.
that was
That was a long time ago.
a,
Yeah.
a long time ago. And I always make the bad joke that every mother in America hated Harley Davidson and what it stood for, and they hated Harley Davidson and what it stood for because their mothers hated what it stood
Sure.
for because they all came of age in a time when Hollywood and media found in the motorcycle community, in Harley Davidson in particular, since Harley really was the motorcycle community, something they could use to create fear, uh,
Yeah.
misconception, misperception, stereotypes, and this whole thing of outlaw bikers
Yeah.
in B movies and drive-in movies and things that always seem to show motorcycle people fighting each other,
Right.
waging war, kidnapping teenage girls, always fighting with the cops, and that was the image that people clung to. That was the association they would have, and the
Yeah.
unfortunate quirk uh, of our species is that when what we see in real life matches what we've been led to believe, we believe stronger. So you'd be out with
Mhm.
in the station wagon with the family going up to the DQ to get some ice cream, and six bikes would pull up and oh my God, they look just like those guys in the movie posters or in the movies. These guys are bad news. Forget
Yeah.
that they're all plumbers and dentists or whatever. You've
Right.
already judged them.
Yeah.
Uh, so what we determine is if we can get people to see us for who we are as a business and who our customers are, if we could put a human face on the business, we
Mm.
don't have to try to deflect or defend the negativity. We'll just being known for who you are, putting that human face kind of paints a different picture in people's
Yeah.
brains of who you are and what you represent. And it's easier to like people if you feel like you know them and understand them, certainly
Yeah.
versus fearing them.
Right, right. Well, and that makes a lot of sense from a human psychology perspective because when we separate ourselves and we start to say the words, well, it's they versus us, we're
Mhm.
grouping people, but when it's when we connect with people, it's really hard to be able to, dislike somebody or judge them negatively. So it's
Well,
it yeah.
we put an emphasis. So much of what we learn, David, I just call accidental learning
Okay.
because we're trying new things, essentially because we were desperate, for lack of a better word, to
Yeah, sure.
turn the business around, save people's jobs,
Hmm.
generate some new revenue. So we started trying to, set this goal. We're going to be the most visible company, motorcycle company in our industry. So we
Okay.
began doing, uh, events at dealerships or large gatherings of
Okay.
riders with music and product displays and product demonstrations and all that kind of stuff that uh, quite quickly began to gather a lot of momentum and a
Mm.
lot of people started showing up. And what we began to see and sense was that the the general public and the law enforcement type communities and the media right along with it would come and see this. So we were nervous about this, or we see all these
Mm.
motorcycles and it immediately made us uncomfortable. And as soon as we came into this environment, we began seeing faces that we recognized. These are just
Oh,
people
yeah.
from the community.
Sure.
He's the guy that
Yeah.
owns the hardware store, and he's the junior high social studies teacher, and whoever these people are.
Yeah.
The temperature just comes down, and you see them
Way
as
down. Mm.
just human beings. We also got the people next door because we
Right.
were the people next door. And
Mm.
remember when I said when what you see matches what you've been led to believe, you believe stronger.
Yeah.
And what you see doesn't match what you've been led to believe, there's a disconnect. So people would get this disconnect. Oh, I expected you to be scary. I expected you to, beat me up and steal my wallet. And also, you're just regular guys. This is kind of cool. And like,
Yeah.
yes, let's leverage this. Let's leverage that kind of
Mm-hmm.
surprise factor that people have. That's not what I expected exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to me too that at the heart of what you did there is you leveraged a lot of human psychology because I know that you talked too about just that connecting with people and connecting to that human part of people, like how we want to what we're attracted to. And
Yeah.
I know in our pre-call you were talking about the the way people get kind of turned on in their head, the dopamine and revving
Yeah.
the engine and it so like talk a little bit about like just that part of the human psychology, because I loved that when we had that chat earlier.
I remember that when we were out courting the investment community, and that was a big part of my job. It was very frustrating at first because the investment community didn't like us, just saw us as a Rust Belt relic. And then as the business began to take off, and investment
Mm,
people say, "Oh my God, we're making a lot of money
yeah,
off these
sure.
motorcycle people."
Yeah.
We began seeing them a lot more frequently. And at one point, I always understood these people, investment community, hold a tremendous amount of sway of public opinion. Because if
Mm,
the New York Times or the Dow Jones or whatever want to know how a company is doing and how it's performing, they tend to not ask the company because they're afraid they're going to get some kind of PR spin. They'll call
right.
the financial community because they know they're going to get, here's the honest truth about what's happening in this industry. Uh, so I said, okay, these people are a conduit to our messaging. I'm standing at a meeting of financial analysts in New York, and they're saying, like, and I said, please don't describe this company as a Harley-Davidson as a product
Mm,
company. And they're like, wait, what? This is what you do. And I just stay with me. They said, and don't describe us as a company with really good marketing, because they were starting to do that. I
okay.
said, that's true, but that's not what makes this business successful. And I said, what describe us, think of us as a human behavior story. We learned to tap into very basic drivers of human behavior and use it to create
Mm,
competitive advantage in ways
yeah.
that our competitors simply don't or can't do. And it
Mm,
would always start these great conversations like, what? And I said, well, the example I always use is think of the Harley rider that's at a red light or at a stop sign.
mm-hmm.
Uh, what do? Is we rev our engine. I mean, even the cop, even NYPD guys on their bikes do
Yeah,
it at
sure.
stop line. And we always said, that's just kind of a reflexive thing. That's something motorcycle people do. But you just strip away uh, all your kind of preconceived notions about people and why this happens. And you discover very, very quickly that what you're seeing is human behavior under a microscope. When we're revving the engine, we're saying, look at me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's loud, so you're going to look. And when you look at that rider, you look at me,
Mm-hmm.
little dopamine's released in my brain.
Mm,
Why? I'm experiencing just a tiny little flash of delight. I'm being
mm,
noticed. I'm being validated. That which
yeah,
all humans seek but find difficult to attain. I'm standing
yeah.
out. I'm different now. Uh, what do humans do to any source of delight in their lives? It's they return to it until it
Mm,
fails to delight us. So we roll up to the
like
next light and do it again. And what that means is, so
mm,
that's the definition of loyalty. We will return to
yeah, love it.
that which delights us until it fails
Mhm.
to delight us. We'll seek that out because we're a
Mm,
joy-seeking species. So
yeah.
I would tell the investment community, what I tell anybody, is that what we're here to do is be a source of delight for people. We're not here to serve. We're not here to sell motorcycles. We're not here to build great motorcycles. We do that,
Mm,
but the primary objective is to
mm,
please and delight people. Make the
mm,
business about uh, uh, the people that we hope to attract, and hope to keep into the family, not about how can we sell you more stuff, because
mhm.
anybody can do that. And they say, "Oh my God, this is working." So well, we have the highest loyalty in the industry, probably the
Right.
highest loyalty of any company on the planet.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People tattoo the name onto their bodies. I mean, that's just crazy
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, behavior
Yes,
from a
right.
consumer product standpoint.
Yeah.
But it's these simple human drivers that make that
Mm,
happen. So we see if
mm,
we elevate people first instead of elevating product first,
yeah.
we're more memorable, we're more human. People feel a connection to us. They feel like
Hmm.
they understand us and we understand them. Therefore, they like us, which
Right.
means they prefer us over other people doing the same, selling the same stuff, two wheels with a
Yeah.
motor on it.
Right, right. Well, and so that shift began to shift then the perception of the public, but then you also leveraged the human component within the company, right? I mean, the culture of the organization was something else that you leveraged. What were some of the things that you did internally to help your people that worked there to embrace that and maybe even delight them too?
Sure. Well, one thing that people have to understand that for some reason doesn't get talked about in school and doesn't get talked about in business school is that every association that you have, that any of us have with a business, some mention a business name and that it pings in your brain, every association that you have with that business, if it's a two-person, mom and pop shop somewhere or a massive airline somewhere, every association you have is a mirror reflection of the culture of that business. So we see a business for who it is because we attach a human face to it, even if we don't like it. That's I don't like them. They
Mm-hmm.
stink. I hate AT&T. They suck, and I do, by the way, and they do suck. Sorry, AT&T, if you're listening. Which it's not the products, it's not
Yeah.
what you're selling, it's the people behind, it's the culture behind it that I don't understand, that I feel doesn't look out for me, that leaves me on hold for 45 minutes if I've got a question about something. I'll call a health insurance company sometime and
Yeah,
see how
right.
much you like the time that you spend with them, right? It tells you everything you need to know about
Mm.
the business. So we know if the association that we have with the business are a reflection of the culture of that business, we see it
Mhm.
for who you are. Uh, that means that we as a business, I mean, if we want to be seen as uh, people who glorify and lift up others, lift up people instead of glorifying product, we have to do that for each other. That has to become ingrained in the culture. And
Mhm.
and
Mm.
we learn this because we kind of discovered pretty quickly as we began going out and getting very, very visible with customers and having conversations and asking simple questions like, what can we do better? What would you
Mm.
like to see us do?
Mhm.
What would the perfect weekend for you look like? And how can we fit into that? What we discover pretty quickly is we are doing a better job of communicating with customers and showing who we are than we are internally. That's
Mm.
not sustainable because they'll
Mm.
they'll see a disconnect if we're
Yeah.
not the same people inside as we are on the outside, which means that we need to uh, create a culture within the business. And the CEO at that time, we got him, Rich Tierling, was a huge believer in this.
Mm.
We need to communicate and uplift and, I always use the word glorify each other the same way we would customers. And the amazing thing is, and
Mm.
I'm sorry this answer is going so long, is it's very contagious
Yeah.
behavior. It comes back
Right.
to this delight. If I see somebody making an extra effort to be super kind to me or, super
Mhm.
passionate and visibly passionate, enthusiastic in front of me, I begin to model that
Yeah.
behavior because
Yeah.
it's more fun than being miserable
Yeah.
or bored or business-like.
Right.
Let's be human-like, let's be people-like and kind of enjoy each other so that we communicate with each other
Mhm.
better. And
Yeah.
that all of that stuff begins to happen so long as the people in leadership positions are
Mm.
modeling the desired behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm not doing it, my employees aren't doing it. The people
Aren't
below me
doing it
aren't
either.
doing it.
Yeah. We're so I really absolutely love this because I think that at the heart of every company is the people. I mean, a company is people. And so I guess my question to you is the things that you learned in your experience with Harley and turning that company around and really focusing on the human element and
Mm.
this delighting where where do you advise companies who want to grow to the next level, whatever that might be for them? It might be they may be a small company, they may be a bigger company. Where should they start to make that turn or make that
What
turnaround?
what what I always do, and I challenge all the companies that I work with, or if I'm out, you know, talking somewhere anywhere in the world, I always share with people the three questions that I posted on my wall on my first day at Harley-Davidson. Not realizing that what I was about to post was kind of important for getting people rallied around one specific thing instead of a million things, but not
Yeah.
really realizing at the time just how important this was going to be in terms of how we viewed our business. And the three questions are, what do people say about us? What do
Mm.
we want them to say? And what are we doing to get them to say it? Meaning, what's the reputation of this business? What do we want it
Yeah.
to be? A customer or somebody who knows you, an investor, a lender,
Mm.
uh, one of your suppliers is talking about you to somebody who could be the single most influential person in your
Mm-hmm.
massive customer, or a legislator or investor, whoever that is. What would you want that person to say?
Yeah.
And unless
Mm.
or until we have agreement internally on what that is, our people can't possibly know what their role here is, what
Mm-hmm.
we're all working toward. And the
Right.
amazing thing is it doesn't matter the business, David, if it's a 2 person, if it's 100,000 person. When I ask the people running the business, what do you want people to say? If
Mm.
there's 6 people in the room, I'll get 6 different answers. And I say, do you see a problem here?
Right.
I
Right.
see a huge problem is you know
Yeah.
what you do, but you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
huge.
Mm.
And if all your employees know is this is what we make, and
Mm.
they see the charts and the data and the
Mm-hmm.
quotas and things on the wall, as they get an understanding of, okay, we make stuff, we sell stuff, we have to do it faster, better, cheaper, like everybody else. But it's really hard to get people to buy into things like numbers and data and efficiencies because at the end of the day, who cares? We can't really
Right.
humanize that. Uh,
Right.
so what do we want this business to be? How do we want to be remembered and
Mm.
talked about? We need to have agreement on that before we can talk about anything else. Because obviously, if we want to be talked about it in a specific
Yeah.
to us way where we want people to know us, understand us, appreciate us for who we are, or prefer us for who we are
Mm.
versus our competitors and talk about us that way, that means our employees or our dealers and distributors and everybody important to the business needs to be
Mm.
exhibiting this specific kind of behavior that brings this, positioning language that how do
Mm.
we want to be talked about
Right.
to life. And leaders will say, well, we have marketing people that can do that, or we have HR people that can do that, or, PR people. And I said, that's not, this isn't a job function. This
Mm-hmm.
is the responsibility of leadership. This is the most valuable asset that you have is your reputation. And who brings your reputation to life is your working culture. And if they're
Mm.
leaving, like they are everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
it's not because they feel like you're not paying them enough money. It's leaving because
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they're not being looked after. They're not important. They're not
Right.
valued. They don't really even understand uh, what they're doing other than making something. Well, so what? I can make something
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
And people, well, geez, we can't stop our people from leaving. They said, says every company in the business in the world that failed. I say, if you're not willing to make an effort to
Yeah.
glorify, lift up, listen to, and become
Mm.
involved with the people that work for you,
Yeah.
you'll never stop that revolving door.
Right. Right.
Instead of talking to somebody once a year when you're having their performance review and telling them
Yeah.
everything that they did wrong
Yeah.
over the year, I mean, why not? Hey, what did you do this weekend? Where do you want to go with your life, man? How can we
Yes.
help you get there?
Right.
Like, wow, well, who,
Right.
who wouldn't respond to that? Oh, somebody's paying attention to me. I
Yeah.
like that. And what do we do to the things that we like as we return to them?
Yeah. Well, and as humans, we're wired to connect, and I think that in a lot of ways, the leaders of the era that I grew up in, the late 70s, 80s,
Mhm.
90s, they I think they've forgotten that. I was just listening to another podcast that talked about this CEO who every day he got up and over his coffee he would send a text message to five of the people that worked with him and worked for him.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, isn't that cool? So every day he got up and his ritual was over coffee, he was going to text somebody, kind of like what you said. Hey, how did the game go last Friday night? And, on a personal level. And I think
Yeah.
that connection, that as leaders, if we can make that connection with people, we're gonna turn something on in our people that is you can't do it any other way.
You can look so many ways at that, David. And something I do instructionally when I'm working with leaders is remember those 3 questions. What are people saying? What do you want them to say? What are you doing to get them to say? Well, what are your What do the people that work here say about you, the
You,
leader or
yeah.
leadership team or the boss? Because
Mm,
you're being talked about
sure.
365 days of the year. You're
Right.
being talked about at every dinner table of every person that works here.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think they're saying about? Well, what would you want them to say? Well, if you want
Hmm.
to speak positively of you and like you're the most awesome human being or whatever, uh,
Right.
that's your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will do that if they see you making an effort on their behalf. They'll
Hmm.
come around, and I've gone to visit. This granted in much larger companies, there'll be a new CEO in place,
Mm.
and they call when I talk to you, and I'll like show up and we'll ride up in the elevator with the guy, and we'll walk down the hall to his office, and I say, "What did you just do?" We were in an elevator with the people who work here.
Mm.
And you did the elevator thing. You stared at the ceiling or you just talked
Yeah.
to me. And then you walk down the hall and walk right past people. They all
Mm.
know the new guy.
I
And
see.
you had this opportunity to just connect, to be nice. Hey, what you working on, man?
Yeah.
Can I help you with it? Like, pow,
Right.
they're going to go tell everybody that you
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
Period. So you have all these opportunities to put
Mm.
a human face on yourself
Right.
so that you're more likable and more attractive
Mm.
to other people.
Yeah.
It's contagious. People, they'll do it too if you're doing it, and you get the other leaders around you doing that.
Hmm.
People can't not. There's a double negative. Can't not react positively to that. Can't
Right.
not react positively. There's
They got to do it no matter what. They've got to react positively. Yeah.
and we do, and it's just simple
Yeah.
human
Mm.
behavior stuff that's ingrained
Right.
uh, ingrained in our species. That's what we
Right.
do. It's what we
Yeah.
react to.
Well, and I think that every leader needs to start to realize that that the human behavior, the human psychology, that's part of being a leader is understanding those things so that we can utilize human behavior and human psychology to help our companies to grow, to help our teams to be cohesive and to help us to work efficiently.
You don't uh, motivate people by telling them what to do.
Right.
That's never
Yeah.
worked in the history of the world.
Yeah.
It'll work for a little while, but
Right.
people resent being told what to do and tend to only do what they're told to do when the boss is looking, right?
Right.
Otherwise, when the boss isn't looking, we tend to do what the boss does. Well,
Mm,
that's what she does, so I'm going to do that too. Uh,
mm,
Swings both ways. She's doing positive things. The people under her do positive things. She's doing negative,
yeah.
complaining about stuff, belittling people. Then they have a staff
Mm,
that does that too.
yeah.
Again, just get on human behavior 101. But what I
Yeah.
always tell uh, employees, because they compete too. Everybody wants
Sure.
to get promoted.
Sure.
Everybody wants to get a raise. Not
Mm,
everybody going to get promoted, get there. What are the people that are running this business saying about you?
right.
They're
Mm,
deciding right now, they're in the boardroom, who's getting promoted, or
yeah.
God forbid, who needs to be let go.
Right.
You're being talked about.
Hmm.
What do they know about you? You have a duty if you want to compete and be first in line and be preferred and thought of positively for raises, promotions, more responsibility, uh, to make yourself more visible.
Hmm.
And a lot of
Mm,
people say, well, I don't even go into an office anymore.
mm,
And I say, you know how many Zoom calls I'm on with businesses, of all sizes, and
yeah.
there might be 10 faces on, there might be 20.
Yeah.
And of that, if there's 10 faces, nine of the people look like they'd rather be dead than have to sit through another minute of whatever it is that's being discussed. And that
Right.
look
Oh yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'm dying here, I'm not paying attention. And I tell people, that's what you're being remembered for.
Mm,
Oh, Fred, he's that guy who never says anything, sits
mm,
in the corner of the
sure.
screen, looks like he's dying, and versus the
Yeah.
person who is talkative, asks questions,
Mm,
participates, but asks him like before, as people
engaged.
are assembling before the call, hey, what'd you do this weekend?
Yeah.
But what I tell people is never just ask a question, always react to the answer. So I was going to go watch my kids play. Oh, that's so awesome. Like, tell me more about that. Whatever. If you show an interest
Yeah.
in someone, they will continue to talk to you. And if that person that you're showing interest in
Yeah.
just happens to be in a leadership position, they're remembering you now. I
Yeah.
like I like Fred. I like Susan.
Hmm.
cool person. Bang. And the takeaway from that I always tell people, just carve it on your on your office somewhere on your computer, is don't be interesting, be interested, and
Yeah.
always think of anything that's about to come out of your mouth is, how do I want to be remembered?
Yeah.
So I don't
Love
think
that.
I'm not here to answer questions or be of service. That's what I'm
Mm,
paid to do. If I want to
yeah.
build my reputation, I have to always think about what do I have to say and do right now that's going to be remembered. And
Mm,
if I'm just being asleep or sitting at the table in a meeting and not participating, well, that's what you're being
that's
remembered
what you're
for.
being remembered for. Yeah.
Period. And so many people just never think
Mm,
about that. Well, I work
yeah.
hard and I'm in here every day, and I work harder than everybody else. No, you don't. Nobody's paying any attention to what time you started and what time you clocked
Yeah.
out. And that's what you're paid to do. You are expected to do a good job.
Yeah.
It's the stuff beyond that that makes you likable, preferable, promotable.
That's so powerful. I love the questions that you posed and gave us to think about on many different levels, that not only from a company perspective and our customers, our leadership, and but each of us individually, what are people saying about us? What do we want them to say? And then what are we doing to get them to say what we want them to say about us? And I think that if any leader who's listening takes those three questions and just contemplates them and reflects on them and then does something with them, I think they can transform their business. And it's really powerful. I think what you shared here is just amazing,
They
Ken. I
they
really appreciate
absolutely
it.
can. And if you're not actively working to build your reputation, somebody else is just going to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. That was like us at Harley. People didn't like us, and we were all criminals, and we did nothing about it.
Yeah.
So that self-inflicted wound, that was our problem. We weren't working
Yeah.
to manage it. We were letting others do it for us.
Yep, either by design or by default, right? I mean,
Yep.
you're either going to do it with intention and on design, or it's going to happen, just by default. And by default never works out really well.
No, it sure does. I don't know if you can see this, but on the front of my phone are the
Yeah,
letters R and R.
yeah,
And that's been on every cell phone. If it's on the front of my laptop, it was on the front of my regular, landlines for years.
yeah.
And that's always to remind me, if my phones are ringing or I'm about to talk to somebody, what do I want them to R remember and R repeat, as in tell somebody else about or
100%.
come back for more of.
Love that.
It just I'm not, if all I'm doing is answering someone's questions and giving them the information that I didn't do anything. They're not going to
Yeah,
remember that. That's what they expected. Business 101. I want to be remembered. So that's what I need to focus on. All right. I got an important person on the call here.
that's
Oh,
so
I got an
great.
opportunity to build my reputation. I might as well take it.
Yeah, yeah. I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. I actually wrote that down. I'm gonna put that in the show notes. I think that's awesome. I
All
love
right. Do it.
that.
I'd love it.
Oh man. Ken, thank you so much for the time that you've given us here today, just to share some of your experience, your wisdom. What's maybe one thing that you'd like
Yeah.
to leave the audience with today, just maybe to be remembered, or maybe what you want them to think about you and remember about you?
Well, let's just make this about everybody. And what I always like to tell people is that the most magnetically attractive of all human traits, that's something that is a force that pulls people toward us, isn't a smiling face or being friendly. The most undeniably magnetically attractive trait is visible with a capital V, passion with a capital P. When you look
Mm,
super happy to be where you are and
hmm.
excited to be talking to whoever it is you're talking to,
Yeah.
everybody will lean toward you because we're a joy-seeking species and
Mm,
we're magnetically attracted to that. And we
so
instantly
good.
begin to mimic that. And people make a judgment in 1/100th of a second the first time they see it on,
Yeah.
I like this guy. I don't like this. I don't like this
Right.
guy. Uh, Based purely on if they look predictable or dull, or if they look like, woohoo, like
Yeah.
I'm here to please,
Let's go.
bang. People like that and are drawn to it immediately. And you're
Yeah.
being judged. Walk into the
Yeah.
meeting, your face on that computer screen. Think
So
about it.
good. Yeah. So important. Sounds, oh, that's good stuff. Good stuff, Ken. Hey, thank you. This has been such a delight. I mean, speaking of delight, it's been delightful just to, hear your stories, hear your perspective, and just, understand some of the lessons that you've learned through your career. It's just, yeah, really good. Really good. I know the audience is going to love it. I've loved it.
Oh, good. My pleasure being here.
Well, thanks again, Ken. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate being here with you, David.